concerning Chanukah and its connection with the menorah and its connection with the menorah which was envisaged in the prophecy of Zechariah at the beginning of the Second Temple period, which also means, to some extent, the final days of prophecy. So we know that throughout the Bible we are given works of prophetic significance. And the sages say the last aspect of written prophecies in the Bible, in the Jewish Bible, was Megillat Esther. That's still part of the Kitvei HaKodesh. That's considered the Holy Scriptures of Judaism. And all the other works have a prophetic power, Ruach HaKodesh. There's the different levels, the level of the Torah, which is, you might say, verbal inspiration, and the later prophets is an expression of prophecy which came not directly from Hashem to be written down as it is in the Torah. So the Torah is described, the 5 books of Moses, but the other books are described in terms of revelations to prophets at different levels. The Ketuvim are a bit lower level, but it's still the power of prophecy. But with the Second Temple period, it began a new period where prophecy as a whole ceased, in which the sages of Chacham Atif Min Avi, they began the period of wisdom. So to look at it more deeply is done by many of the major thinkers of Torah, like the Vilna Gaon and Maral and others. We go back to earlier sources. In the world at large, when idolatry was widely practiced, so there came divine prophecy to be followed instead of idolatry and idolatrous superstitions. But when there arose Greek civilization, although they also were idolaters, but the highest level of Greek civilization was the development of the human mind. But the human mind without the concept of the transcendental God. Even those who believed in God, that God created nature, and that nature has a power of its own. They believed in man is the measure of all things. So, even though idolatry was still practiced, but there were so many amongst the Greek thinkers, and it's continued also amongst the Roman thinkers and philosophers, who recognized that there is a God. But what did they put as the first priority? Is man's mind, which can find out the truth about different things. So what happened, and the sages say, the men of the Great Assembly, they nullified the power of idolatry. They should no longer have any power of the Jewish people. And it's true, the Jewish people had a tendency to worship idols all the way through the period of prophets, in the First Temple period. But when it came to the Second Temple period, the danger to the Jewish people was not really idolatry. I mean, they opposed it as a whole. At least the sages, the wiser men, the people who had more understanding, they realized they had no more power at the idols. But what happened in its place was, many of them became agnostics. or even if they did not doubt the existence of God, at least they did not realize that God Himself has given us a path of life which we can follow, because He looks after us at all times. He's transcendent. So this was represented by the menorah, because the menorah has to be kindled by the Kohanim and the Leviim, and if they kindle it in the right manner, with right intentions, as I explained, that the 7 branches of the menorah refer to the 7 aspects of wisdom that comes through intelligence, which has to be dedicated to the Torah of Hashem. And that's why the Western lamp faced the Holy of Holies, which contained the written Torah. The written Torah is really a deep mystery. There are many aspects which can be understood. There are other aspects that represent the mind of God in the way in which human beings should follow it. And as we say, it's prophetic. So it's represented by Torah Shebichtav. But the Second Temple period, there was no more, after the Megillat Esther's period, after that, no more holy writings. The writings afterwards, which did continue, should have been known by heart, but not really to be written down, because it had to be a living Torah. How did it become a living Torah? Through the oral tradition. So the menorah represents how the teachers of Torah have to kindle the continuity of the light of Torah day by day. So really the menorah represents the flourishing period of the development of Torah, of the oral tradition. And that's why in the, let's say, the written records concerning Chanukah are not considered holy writings, even though some of them were written by contemporary sages who were very great. But they were not recorded as part of the holy canon, you might say, the Kitvah called in English the Holy Scriptures for us. Therefore, the Chanukah is the first festival of the constant power, the stream, which keeps the Jewish people alive, which is the Torah Sheba'al Peh. So, the Bet Din of the Hasmoneans, they decided what had to be done. For example, when the Maccabees began their campaign against the Hellenists, against all those who were trying to keep idolatry and the new sports and so on to become the lifestyle of the Jewish people, so they decided, look, let's learn how to fight them, because why? Because they were under order. If you're going to carry on teaching Torah in public, or you're going to carry on the Brit Milah and other Jewish practices, we're going to kill you and torture you. So what, we should carry on like that? We'll fight them. So when it came to Shabbos, these were very religious people that said, well, Shabbos we can't fight them. On Shabbos we're not allowed to. And what happened? The Hellenists, the Seleucids found out about it, and they made their attacks on Shabbos. So they set up the Bet Din, there's Sanhedrin, that time, and they decided, no, on Shabbat we must fight also. We're not going to let them kill us and rob us. And the truth is, if they wouldn't have set up that principle in their time, who knows? Then all the Jews would have become a satellite state for the Seleucid Empire, which was very corrupt and which made people into slaves and tortured them until they followed their path of life. So that's what they did. They said, we'll fight them. I mean, you want to understand the parallels to the Maccabean period, you have in communist Russia, in the Stalinist level. There are a lot of parallels between these two oppressive civilizations, if one can call them that. So, that is why the discussion concerning Chanukah is very interesting. Not only is there no holy written record, there's hardly a mention of Chanukah in the whole of the Talmud. And one of the reasons is because they were afraid. In due course, what happened to Hasmoneans, we know. The Hasmoneans continued right into the Roman period, but they became very corrupt. And they fought one another, and many of them became what's called Sadducees. They left the true tradition of Torah, and many of them they committed a lot of crimes. Nevertheless, they tried to lead the nation, and caused civil wars. And it was this corruption of the Hasmoneans that also afterwards caused the destruction of the temple, if you follow it through, because the Hasmonean spirit still existed to some extent in the rulership of the country and even in the rulership of the temple. And therefore the temple became destroyed. But what did flourish was the Torah Shebaal Peh. But who was now let's try now. First of all, who was the compiler of the Mishnah? You know who?
Rabbi Huda Nasi.
Nasi. So Rabbi Huda Nasi, you've got to understand what lies behind this. Rabbi Huda Nasi was the head of the Sanhedrin, and he and his line, which went back to Hillel, goes back to the tribe of Yehuda. And the tribe of Yehuda are the ones where it says already in the blessings for Yehuda, they're the ones that should rule the people of Israel. In other words, in the Torah state, it's already mentioned in the blessings of Yaakov, and afterwards the blessings of Moshe Rabbeinu, the tribe of Yehuda should be the leaders, because Yehuda was already the leader in the family. If you want to understand the current Parshias, you can only understand it on that basis. Yehuda had a character of leadership, and he was held responsible by the other brothers for leading the whole nation. And Yehuda Nossi, he, for example, he had to work with the Roman government to create a peace, and he did. He managed to do it in his time. So he was like the spiritual. And the Hasmoneans, they were mainly interested in politics. The late Hasmoneans, they became corrupt. And he said, why they become corrupt? Because they should not have combined the priesthood with the political leadership of the country. Because the priesthood has different categories. And Levi was destined to dedicate himself to the priesthood, partly because Levi has in himself total loyalty to Hashem, and we're being willing to kill and be killed for the sake of Hashem, as was shown by the Maccabees originally, when it was justified, and as was even shown by Shimon and Levi, when they killed Chamo and Shechem Beno, and they took back their sister. In fact, their claim against Yaakov was, hakazonah. Are we going to allow immorality to become an acceptable code for the Jewish people? Because immorality, and especially go make liaison with the low immoral nations around and reach their level, will destroy the Jewish people. As was shown already, if you go look at the thread of history, as was shown when the people of Israel, the 12 tribes, were on the border of conquering and taking over Eretz Canaan. So there was a great danger that they would all intermingle with the Moabite beautiful young women, and they'd worship their idols. And that's Bilam. Bilam, who saw this happen, he said to Balak, there's no way I can remove blessing from this people as long as they're loyal to Hashem. But I'll give you an advice. He gave the advice. It was very clever. He said, the people of Israel are the people of God. But once they intermingle with the nations, they'll become what we call lost Jews. They won't know Jews anymore. Like happened to the 10 tribes, they all got lost. And even the remaining tribes, you know, if there would not have been assimilation in the last few hundred years, the Jews we'd be a far larger nation. But assimilation into marriage causes Jews, through their children, to become non-Jews. Yeah, they made, the person in America I know, he together with a few others, they made statistics of who remains Jewish from the Reform, of the unaffiliated, who were Jews, they made the statistics, and the Orthodox. They found out those who belong to the Reform or wider afield, after 2 or 3 generations, there's nothing left of their families. They disappear. They're no longer Jews. They don't want to be known as Jews. Yeah. Here today, even the BDS who say we're Jewish and everything, they are not as bad as the millions of Jews who will not say they're Jewish. And they say we're not Jewish. Then they go, some go to other religions, become Christians, but the majority become agnostics and say, no, we're just members of the country where we live, but they have nothing, anything to do with Israel and nothing to do with the Jewish people. They also become lost. And there are even predictions that ultimately, as it's going on, because the rate of intermarriage assimilation is growing, there'll be nothing left of diaspora Jewry. But they made statistics and showed the Orthodox, they survive and they're growing. And the same applies here in Israel. Here in Israel, that's what some people are afraid of. The leftists and those who really, why shouldn't we pork? Why do we have to keep any laws? These sections of Jewry, they have within themselves the seeds of becoming disappearing Jews. But where do we find it? It can thrive amongst the religious. And the Bali Tshuva today also, they're part of the rejuvenation of Jews. So therefore, the menorah, why was it such an important prophecy of Zechariah? And that's what we read on next Shabbos Chanukah, we're going to read that about this menorah that seems to constantly get new fuel. What's that? It's the oral tradition. And therefore the discussion in the Gemara on Chanukah also describes where did God command us to make a blessing on a mitzvah, which is from the sages. The whole yesod, the whole fundamental of the oral tradition comes from a passage in the Chumash, because the Chumash says, if you've got any doubts about anything to do with God's law, and you can't ask God in, we haven't got prophets. So what do? You go to the biggest sages of the time, and they will tell you what you have to do. And so that Hashem, this is the word of God himself. God said to Moshe Rabbeinu, said to Moses, if you've got any doubts, then what to do, and there's no prophets left, go to the sages and they'll tell you. and you have to follow what they're saying. And therefore you can say, Asher Kitchan Mitzvotav. He sanctified with the mitzvot to kindle lights of Chanukah. Because that's the source in the Talmud concerning Chanukah is also concerned with how do we know we've got to keep the laws of the rabbis. That's the source. In my synagogue, I had questioned frequently. They all said, oh, we all know the Bible, and we like it, and so on. But why do we do all these rabbinical laws? So I used to tell them that, the fact you've got to go to synagogue and say certain prayers, that's nearly all rabbinical law. The fact that so many of you celebrate a bar mitzvah, the fact that you do come to the synagogue, and when somebody dies, you want to say Kaddish, and you say a Kaddish. That's all rabbinical law. Let's say that you wouldn't have a synagogue, you wouldn't have all these rabbinical laws concerning when somebody dies, or when somebody gets married, somebody's a bar mitzvah. You say in England, you should say like this, yes, life is hatches, there's hatches, catches, and dispatches. Yeah, you probably heard anything here. Then you go to synagogue. Hatches when you got Brit Milah, got to go to synagogue. Somebody's born. Catches is the engagement. Matches is the marriage, and dispatches is death. Those are the four milestones of synagogue life. Yeah, you've got the four milestones. Get the kid. So, thank you. I hope I'm answering your question. Mm-hmm. But I think a drink would help.
Oh.
Yeah?
No, I'm listening.
Well, better bring a drink. Because, yeah, we're on video, so... Right. Yeah, okay. And the continuation of this, I'll have to leave it till tomorrow. And I must say, today, I've answered your question more than your question.
It was a good answer.
Thank
I
you.
didn't know that was the minority.